The Mario series has some iconic villains like Boom Boom and Bowser Jr. However, a new group of them was introduced in Super Mario Odyssey, the Broodals. But will and can these enemies ever return to the series again, or was this their only appearance in the franchise? Well, let's find out. The Broodals are a group of villainous anthropomorphic rabbits who double as wedding planners in Super Mario Odyssey. Their leader is Topper, while Madame Broode, a massive, morbidly obese rabbit in a red dress and hat, is their boss. They originally came from the dark side of the moon, specifically a location known as Rabbit Ridge. Bowser hires them to plan his wedding to Princess Peach. However, Mario then tries to stop them, battling them through the game's many kingdoms. And so we run through the world of Super Mario Odyssey chasing these weird rabbits. But now for the million-dollar question. Will these characters return at some point? Or is this gonna be a one-time thing like Mario plus Rabbids? Yeah, that surprised us a bit, didn't it? Yeah. Alright, Ubisoft, now get out. I already gave you too much credit by mentioning you. Never again. Well, now that we took the trash out... I'm talking about Ubisoft here because surprisingly enough, Mario plus Rabbids wasn't even that bad. We can finally talk about the topic at hand. Let's first look at their exact role in the game, because this is quite important actually. They need to fit in future stories after all. Well, like I mentioned before, they're essentially wedding planners and had two roles in a game, keeping Mario busy and helping Bowser collect artifacts. For example, they invade the Cap Kingdom and kidnap Tiara and steal a ring from some sort of rock golem thing, I think. Anyways, what it comes down to is that they're only really there to plan this wedding. There's no other reason for them being there. Other villains that kept returning, like the Koopalings, always had a more permanent connection to Bowser. They are his kids after all. And enemies like Boom Boom had almost no connection, making it very easy to put him in, because they don't have to keep anything in mind. Both of these villains were seen in a ton of games, especially the Koopalings. And Boom Boom even returned out of nowhere after disappearing for more than 20 years. So two things are certain. Nintendo is extremely unpredictable, but we already knew that. And the Broodals' background story and overall role aren't very handy for a sequel. They are tied to the entire wedding theme, so the next game would have to follow a similar story, at least to a degree. However, there are three ways they could return lore-wise, despite of their difficult and specific role. One option is by changing them completely. They have changed the origin story and personality of characters before, so they could always do that again. Who cares that they used to be wedding planners? Now they're just Bowser's minions and help him with his evil plans. Nintendo would certainly do something like this. They even changed the Koopalings from being Bowser's blood-related kids to being adopted. Somehow. So really, they do whatever. It wouldn't be very fitting, but the Super Mario series has never been about the story. Another thing they could do is change everything because of the events seen in Super Mario Odyssey. One way to get rid of their wedding planner business is by saying that they went bankrupt because they lost in Super Mario Odyssey. Maybe this cost them a lot of money and ruined their career completely. Because of this, they can do anything with them story-wise and even create a revenge plot. Mario is the reason why it all went wrong after all. They could even build an entire game around this plot. However, I don't really expect them to do this, although it would be an extremely good and interesting choice. And funny enough, by the looks of it, Nintendo's crafting this narrative, which I found out after I wrote this part. Haha, Wily knows Nintendo by now. Because Rango, who is encountered for the final time at Dark Side, expresses his anger at Mario for stopping Bowser's wedding, as no one will hire the Broodals anymore due to their failure. So by the looks of it, they want to go for this type of plot. However, this could always change, because it's Nintendo after all. Now the last option would be a bit random, but it's certainly possible. They originally came from the dark side of the moon, so what if Mario returns there? They would certainly remember his face and are probably vengeful, so they would certainly attack Mario. Now if they would go for this option, then they would most likely only appear in one section of the game. Something similar to the fight you have with them at Rabbit Ridge. Now another extremely important aspect is their boss fights. Their base mechanics need to function in the next game after all. All their attacks have at least something to do with hats, and Mario needs to use Cappy in order to take them out. So let's have a quick look at them one by one to see if their general mechanics and themes would work in different kinds of games. First up, Topper, the client relations rabbit. He stacks 2 copies of his hat atop his regular one before skipping towards you. To defeat him, you need to knock off his hat and then his head is exposed. At that point, you can stomp him. However, the knocked off hats will slide around like Koopa shells, and he also has an attack where he spins along the ground level with hats on his head. Both these things can damage Mario, so it isn't as easy as it sounds. Especially not when he has a lot of them. Now, could this work in any other game than Super Mario Odyssey? Well, yes, they could easily expand on this. If Cappy doesn't return in future games, then they could use the opportunity to come up with some creative ways to damage him. Besides that, he doesn't do a whole lot with the hats themselves, so they could always add on to that. The fights with him were also great, and especially the last one was a huge challenge. So I would love to see him again in the next 3D game. Now for Harriet, the pyrotechnician. In battle, she throws bombs at Mario using her hair, which Mario has to knock back by hitting them with Cappy. After a while, if Mario didn't knock back any bombs, she throws a much larger bomb, which is attached to her hair and gets stuck in the ground, so that you can easily throw it back. When Harriet gets hit by a bomb, she loses her protective helmet, allowing Mario to jump onto her head to score a hit. Then she puts on a new helmet, withdraws her body into it, and starts flying around as a UFO while dropping numerous bombs onto the battlefield. And all of the explosives leave puddles of lava when they explode. This fight could work in almost any Mario game. Cappy doesn't add a whole lot here. A punch would also work as a counterattack to the bombs. Besides that, explosives are a fun and interesting gimmick. You can do almost anything with this. A good example of something they could experiment with is bombs. Using those, they could make completely new attacks. Nintendo has a ton of options with this, even more so than Topper. Think of stuff like tanks, bullet bills, mines, and way more that could be used as a way to attack the player. Besides that, Cappy and hats in general play a tiny role in this fight, and could easily be replaced by anything else. Now for Rango the Bouncer. He attacks by throwing his hat like a boomerang, as it resembles a circular saw or grinder. Mario must throw Cappy at it to flip it over, then bounce on it to land on Rango. He will then partially withdraw into his hat and hop in pursuit of Mario. So this fight depends a ton on the overall hat theme, which will make it a lot more difficult to put in different games. It would require a partial redesign, but luckily enough, his attack is very similar to a boomerang. So they would most likely replace it with that, add a different way of damaging him, and add any interesting moves with boomerangs, because he can easily have multiple. Now for Spayward. Spayward? I don't know, it's a strange name, he's an entertainer. He attacks by spewing poison all around himself before going after you. The poison can be removed using Cappy, and his hat must be knocked off so that he can be stomped on. Each time he is hit, he retreats into his hat and spins around the arena, leaving trails of poison coming out after a while or if Mario stomps on the hat. This one would also need a redesign because getting rid of the poison without the hat becomes difficult. You need a ranged weapon of sorts. One way they could solve this problem is by combining it with a power-up or item. A good one would be a boomerang flower or maybe even Koopa shells that you would need to throw. There are certainly ways how they could make it work in another game, even if Cappy isn't seen in it. Now for our final one, Madame Broode, the boss. In battle, she attacks using her pet Chain Chomp, which you need to control with Cappy. When controlled, she tries to catch him with her hands, getting tired after a few swipes. All that's left at that point is launching yourself against her, and every time you do so, you will get out of the chain chomp and she will throw it at you. Now this boss would have to be completely redesigned unless Cappy returns in the next game, because it completely revolves around that mind-controlling piece of cloth. Now I don't know how they would do this, but it's certainly needed. Out of all of them, this one would be the most difficult to deal with. So could they possibly return? Well, story-wise, there's a really good chance that they will be seen again. And when it comes to the fights, most of them need a little bit of work to function. And I think Nintendo is also a bit done with mini-bosses like Boom Boom and the Koopalings. They have been seen year after year, so it was certainly time for something new. And the Broodals are still new enough to appear in more games. So who knows what will happen in the future? I'm certainly looking forward to it. Thank you for watching this video, you lovely human. Be sure to click the subscribe thing and the bell, yay, and more videos, and like this video. I hope you enjoyed it all, and I will see you all next week on Tuesday. Have a great weekend, you lovely humans.